of new medicines. So he's your expert in those areas if you have any questions for him later on.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this convention for giving me the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. And I'm a bit sorry because after Francesco, Ricci, Bitti, and my presentation dealing more with the dark side of sport, I wouldn't want to bring this too much to the attention in the sense that, I mean, after all, sport remains a very strong vector of emotion and innovation. So this is also what I will try to briefly cover in my presentation. For those of you who are not very familiar with the World Anti-Doping Organization, this is a very unique organization bringing together the international sport movement and the governments of the world. So we have this hybrid organization bringing these two worlds together to discuss about doping in sport. We've been established as an independent agency with one of our mission being to promote, coordinate, and monitor the fight against doping in all its forms. And today, and I would say over the past 10 years or 15 years, the fight against doping has really tremendously evolved, and I will try to give you a little hint on this evolution as well. One of our first mission has been to establish a set of rules that can apply all across the world. And this is certainly not a very simple challenge or task to achieve. As you can imagine, we talk about different countries, we talk about different sports, we talk about different cultures, and having to bring all these people together, talk about a single set of rules, was in itself a very strong challenge. Fortunately, we were having the support of the top leaders in the field, including with tennis, Francesco, Ricci, Bitti, which we've got the privilege to have here with us this afternoon, and other leaders in sport and other ministers from different countries, including Europe, being very strong promoters of this set of rules. So we were able to succeed and, in a sense, draft these rules. Part of these rules covered an aspect that is related to anti-doping research. One of the big deficiencies of the past system was not to integrate science, innovation into the fight against doping in sport. Anti-doping was more a follower than a proactive actor in the fight, in the fight against doping, in the integration of rules and new technologies in our field. So WADA has been established with a research budget which, over the past little more than 10 years, invested more than $60 million into anti-doping research. WADA, being non-profit, we are more a promoter of technologies, a supporter of technologies. We do not keep the intellectual property for ourselves, but we find it a very strong incentive for the investigators to receive money from us and develop the technologies and keep the intellectual property. And WADA only keeps, if you will, a right to use this technology, but we are not necessarily in the end the primary users. Our role is mainly to provide guidance, to support knowledge development and technology transfer, and of course, keep whatever is necessary for the fight against doping in sports. So in that role, WADA is an innovation promoter working with different research teams from private companies or academic organizations around the world. The code, as I was mentioning, is a unique set of rules applying around the world. And we've got today nearly 700 sport organizations that are using the code and the international standards that are part of the code as their set of rules. And today, 175 governments have also joined this effort via UNESCO convention. And this is, according to the UNESCO, one of the most successful conventions ever drafted by the UNESCO. So that's in itself an achievement. I'm very often asked, what are the criteria to ban a substance or a method? And this is embedded in the code. And what is very important to understand is that the code itself is, after all, a collective effort by all stakeholders. It's not the WADA drafting the rules. Even if WADA has a leading role, we facilitate the process. But in fact, we are only a consensual organization hearing from the sport movement, the different federations around the world, the athletes, representatives of athletes, and we hear, of course, also from the governments and, in particular, the ministries of sports around the world. So this is a very collective voice. And concerning what can be accepted and not in sports, we are bound by some rules. We've got criteria, for example, to ban or consider banning substances and methods. And of course, the capacity to enhance performance is one of the key criterion, but it's not the only one. There is also the notion of risk for the health of the athletes and also the violation of the spirit of sport. And this, in a sense, encompasses all the key elements that, and the key values that we decided collectively to protect in sport. Of course, we have to talk about expertise because a lot of what we're doing, like many organizations, is expertise-based. We need to have the medical, the legal, the ethical, and of course the scientific elements to decide on new molecules or existing substances or new methodologies that could have a negative influence in sports. And when I say negative, I take it from the doping perspective, not necessarily from the technological standpoint. Being a world organization, there is also the element of culture. Cultures vary around the world, and that's certainly a benefit for all of us. Having said that, when you come into some discussions, there are sometimes some cultural nuances that we have to take into account, and I mentioned the principle of precaution that is, I would say, very dear to some countries, in particular in Europe, that is certainly less prevalent in other countries for other continents. So this is something that we have to integrate. The perception on factual, I would say, elements that are factual, of course, may vary based on these cultural elements. And being, again, a world international organization, this is something we have to integrate. And we also have to accept that the rules are not written in marble. We have to progress, we have to evolve as human knowledge and technology evolve themselves. So this is something that we have to integrate almost on a daily basis. And being a science representative at WADA and sometimes the voice of science at WADA, I can assure you that in science the world is moving extremely quickly. Now, if we talk about, and very briefly, that's not the main purpose of my talk, there are different substances that are real challenges for us. Usually, the medicines are well known. They are public, there is public information, a drug is registered, we have access to this information, we have access sometimes to the detection methods. They are usually not too much of a problem. More interestingly, I would say, are the drugs in development by the biopharmaceutical industry. There are thousands of molecules that are developed by the pharmaceutical industry, and these are certainly the medicines and maybe the cures of tomorrow, and we cannot be a brake to the development. But now we have to be aware that some of these substances or technologies will become the doping agents of tomorrow, and what has a role to anticipate what doping will be in 5 years or 10 years from now. And this is why we have established collaborative links with the biopharmaceutical industry to facilitate the exchange of information and allow us to receive confidential information and develop the anti-doping tests of tomorrow. Now, very interestingly, is that there are a lot of illegal substances that today circulate around the world. They are designer drugs, and we have seen several cases of drugs that have been especially designed and made available to the athletes for doping purposes. This goes as far as this. And of course, there are the street drugs, illegal drugs, and because in sport we deal with a young, usually a fairly young population, some of these drugs permeate into our anti-doping system. And you may not realize, but there are tens of drugs, illegal drugs, that are released around the planet every year. And that's a challenge for everybody in charge with drug abuse or drug control around the world. Detection, of course, in itself is a challenge. I hear very frequently, not only by people working in the field or sport fans or journalists, you're always, a step behind. That's not true. not in all sectors. We have done a lot of efforts to remediate to this situation, but we have to accept also that there are some inherent limits or limitations into what we are doing. When a drug is taken by an athlete to enhance performance, of course you have to collect at the right time. If you collect days, months away from the absorption of a drug, you are very unlikely to find anything. And today, and I mentioned that here, there are drugs with time of residence in the body that are extremely short. This is only a benefit for the patients. This is only more challenging for us. Also, what people do not always realize is that we cannot take everything we want from the athletes, and that's logical. If I need a piece of muscle, needless to say that even if this is very good in terms of testing, it's very unlikely that a lot of athletes will collaborate with us, with me, to give me a piece of muscle that I may need to test a new substance, for example. So there are some limitations, as well as the volume of fluid we can take from an athlete. The athletes are not patients. When you're a physician, when you're a doctor, you meet with a patient, you can always say if you've got some additional analysis to conduct, you ask the patient to come back the following week or the following month. That's fairly easy to do because it's very unlikely that the pathology disappears. So you've got access almost ad libitum to fluid. Well, when you've got a sample collection from a doping control station, you've got a few milliliters of urine, or you've got even sometimes a few microliters, hundreds of microliters of blood, and you need to run all your analysis and sometimes your investigation. So this is a real limitation that we have to integrate. Of course, also the similarities today, and this is again good in terms of pharmacology, that some drugs or peptides or hormones are absolutely identical to what is secreted by your body. And the major difficulty in our position at WADA, and my position in particular, is to distinguish between what is endogenous, meaning produced by the body, and what is exogenous, that could have been used by the athletes to enhance performance, that is not naturally produced by the body. Cost, I will not necessarily mention that, but that's a reality. We heard from Francesco, Ricci, Bitti that an international federation has to be very careful where they put their money, and their role is more in sport development. Of course, if you invest a lot in anti-doping, which is sometimes necessary if doping is an issue in your sport, then it derives resources from your sport development activities. That's a reality that the leaders in sport around the world face, unfortunately. And sometimes, and we have to accept this, even if the world is changing very quickly, there are still some countries or sport that are more lenient in terms of the fight against doping in sport. It's easy to ignore. It's more difficult to commit and really address the issue face to face. And this is one of our roles at WADA, to explain to the sport leaders around the world, or in some countries, why it's absolutely necessary today to fight against doping in sport, and why a credible sport program in a country, or sport competitions in a country, necessarily come with a strong anti-doping program. If we look at the future, as I mentioned, one of WADA's role is to anticipate what doping will be in the future. And sometimes the future is tomorrow, sometimes the future is 5 or 10 years from now. But one of our roles, one of my roles, is to look at the technology development, at the innovations around the world, and see where things are likely to move in terms of doping. And gene doping has been picked up by WADA more than 10 years ago as potentially one of the major threats that sport could face. If WADA were not to react, be a bit too passive, this is clearly something what we could face. And what is gene doping? It's simply, as I mentioned here, the transfer of a gene, what we call a transgene, into the body with the purpose of increasing performance. One easy example, erythropoietin, EPO, that has been used, as you may have read in the press, by several athletes in their sports, in particular endurance sports, to boost the production of red blood cells. This is a very good drug for people who are anemic, either related to kidney failure or cancer treatments. But the fact is that this is also a wonderful drug to boost your blood production as a healthy individual. And it's been used, overused, and abused by athletes, And we know that some athletes could be tempted to use an EPO gene and have it injected in their body to have an extra copy of the EPO gene and produce more EPO and more blood cells, which in the end is going to give them more capacity to transfer oxygen to their muscles, and so more likely to be performance enhancing. So this is something we looked into very carefully. There is a lot of myth around gene doping because it's gene manipulation. I think a lot of people who are not into the scientific field think gene is something that is incredibly complex and incredibly mysterious, even if all of us have kilometers of genes in our body. This is something that is so different, I would say, from the science we are usually exposed to. And a lot of people think, you know, well, what is it about? Well, in fact, it's still today fairly experimental, even if there is progress of medicine by the day in that field, and certainly very risky. I mean, there's been patients who died as part of protocols of gene therapy. So this is certainly not something that is easy to masterize, but still doable by, I would say, almost any average scientist in the field of molecular biology. So a risk that we take certainly very seriously, and we know some of the experts we are working with in the world who are leading experts in gene therapy. Some of them have been approached by athletes or by coaches ready to have their whole team treated with gene doping. Particular transfer for human growth hormone, or IGF-1. I know one expert in the US, after he gave a presentation, he's been really flooded by emails and calls, several tens a week, about how could my team be treated or trying to have access to his technology. So behind the myth, there is certainly a reality that we have to take into account, and one of WADA's role has been to develop the tools to detect gene doping in the future. When we talk, and this is a lot about what we've been doing also, is communications. I mean, a lot today is about transferring information, transferring knowledge, transferring competence. And this is, in a sense, what we are doing, all of us here today, is to create exchange around some important themes where either actors or would like to be part of. And what the code has created and the different international standards have created is a common language. And this is very important. I was hearing this morning that sometimes the cultural hurdles can prevent good communication or good action. And this is the very first step of WADA with our stakeholders, was to create a common framework to communicate. And this is true between sport federations and the governments. And this is also true going from elite athletes to recreational athletes. So it was very important to create this common platform of discussion, of knowledge, and we achieved this using developing the World Anti-Doping Code. We also created the tools to communicate. It's not only creating rules, it's also creating tools. And we have developed this anti-doping administration and management system, which is the vector for all the results from the anti-doping community that goes into this system and allows in real-time exchange of information, of facts, which allow the international federations or the National Anti-Doping Organization and WADA to exchange on the same basis. And that's also absolutely key, as you can imagine. As I was also saying earlier, doping today is not just abuse of some substances. There is also what is before the drug comes to the athlete or the athletes or their entourage. And a lot has to do with trafficking, a lot has to do with mafias around the world, developing and selling the drugs to the athletes on illegal markets, on the internet, for example, but not only. And we've got today some agreements with Interpol, with the World Customs Organizations, with, as I was mentioning, with the biopharmaceutical industry, to allow this flow of information and allow us to communicate and identify the risks of tomorrow. Finally, because we talk about technologies and communications, a lot has to do with how we can use the proper tools and we can follow the trends and the technologies. And of course, all of us are equipped with smartphones, and we even have some athletes when we talk about whereabouts, so how to localize the athletes, they say just use my smartphone. I've got a GPS, you could do that. Of course, there are some hurdles to this. We have to be very careful about protecting the data, protecting privacy of the athletes. That's certainly something we are extremely careful about at WADA. But this is also something that is coming in particular with a new generation of athletes who are less concerned about privacy issues than the former generation. This is something that is coming into the debate. We're also developing tools, as I was saying, to facilitate transfer of information. Forget about the very traditional doping control forms, filled in by hand. Today, there are other devices we can use and we are working on to facilitate the communication between the athlete or the entourage of the athlete and the sport authorities or the anti-doping authorities. And finally, and we follow a trend, certainly in what is going to be possibly, not to say surely, the medical approach in the future, again, being based on smartphones. Tomorrow, and it's already the reality today, but it will expand in the future, is how to use your smartphones as medical devices. I mean, some of them can be used to monitor blood pressure, diabetes, hemoglobin concentrations. This is something that is becoming a reality in real medicine, I would say, in the field. This is something that we can certainly think about in terms of anti-doping. It could be as simple as giving a call to an athlete and say, put your finger on this device that is connected to your smartphone, and then we can draw some information that can be potentially for us extremely useful in terms of following some biological variables from the athlete. So all this, again, was to give you a little snapshot on some of the activities at WADA and how connected we are to science, how connected we are to technologies, and how we try to promote, of course, the development of technology, or at least the integration of technologies into the day-to-day fight against doping in sport. So I will stop here, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Olivier Rabin. And now finally to Our Lady to talk about sports as a tool for social change and peace. Put your hands together for Méabh Khalil. She's a prize-winning sports official and the founder of the Beirut Marathon and of the Beirut Marathon Association. Back in 2001, she had a very serious accident. She was told that she would never run again. But when she recovered, she decided to use this experience as a means of promoting sport as a means to peace. The floor is yours. I believe you'll